Once again, Romans 13, verse 8. Owe no man anything but to love one another. For he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. For this, thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not covet. And if there be any other commandment, it is briefly comprehended in this saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor. Wherefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. The title of the message this afternoon is For Love's Sake. For love's sake. So the question we have for you this afternoon, first of all, is, who is thy neighbor? I remember one time I was at a men's Bible study when I first was saved. It was always usually on a Saturday. It happens to be down at the pastor's house that day, and it was in the afternoon instead of the evening like normal. And I'm sitting there, and they're reading the Bible and talking, about the subject at hand. And one old gentleman, he was in World War II. He had a steel plate in his head, so he was a little different sometimes, and he knew the Bible really well. And he had a habit of interrupting, no matter what it was, because he just was, he was an elderly man. And he reached over to me and he says, "You know who your neighbor is?" Real loud. And not at that time I didn't know who my neighbor was, other than my next door neighbor. So I didn't know. He said, "You don't know who your neighbor is?" It's like, okay. And then Brother Mink, he kind of said, "Okay, Brother Mike, that's enough." He said, "Brother Roger, come over here and sit." So I went over there and embarrassed me to death because I was real shy and bashful, and I just about melted right there. But I know who my neighbor is. And we see now Paul enlarges the circle to include not only government officials, but our neighbor as well. So keep in mind that the New Testament definition of a neighbor has nothing to do with the street address or geography. Okay, so that's not your neighbor, according to our Christianity. In Luke chapter 10, you don't have to turn there, in verse 29, the lawyer asks, "Who is my neighbor?" And in a kind of a sarcastic, tone. And in the parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10, verse 30-36, Jesus changed the question to, which of these three was neighbor to him? Now, if we go over there, let's just turn to Luke. We'll take a look at the story there. Luke chapter 10 and verse 30. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Good Samaritan. Luke chapter 10 and verse 30. Jesus answering said, "A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment and wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side." You don't want to get involved. "And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Then Jesus asked that question, Which now of these 3 thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? Now, if you notice there, his own kind, the priest and the Levite, passing by. It was the Samaritan, the one who was hated by the Jews, that had compassion on him. The issue is not really who is my neighbor, but to whom can I be a neighbor for the glory of God? That's the question. Who can you be a neighbor to for the glory of God? For the glory of Christ? It is not a matter of law, but of love. And this is what Paul deals with here. And that's what we want to look at here for the rest of this lesson, this message. So, the second point I have is the fulfillment of the law. So what is the fulfillment of the law when it comes to our neighbor? While the believer lives under the law of the land, he also lives under a much higher law as a citizen of heaven, the law of love. See, there's an argument today. We're not under the law. We're not under the law that God gave to the Jews. Well, it depends on how you look at it. We're not underneath the ceremonial law, but we are under the law. And I always come back with the question and say, okay to commit adultery, fornication. It's okay to steal. Is it okay to kill somebody or murder somebody? Is that okay? Well, no. See, they want to back up that and say, no, it's not okay. Well, why isn't it okay? What's the law? Exactly. It's the law of the land. We have a law, and we're bound by the law. See, that's what's so aggravating with our government is we, and I would take all of us, are law-abiding citizens. We obey the law. We don't break the law. We don't break into a man's house and steal. We don't go out here in the street and break into a car and steal a car. We don't break into churches and destroy an inside of it. We don't do that. We're under the law. The law of the land that God has laid down that we follow. And it's, we believe in the Ten Commandments, to obey those laws. We're continually to do that. We don't stop because we're not under the ceremonial law. So in fact, love is the fulfillment of the law. Because love from the heart enables us to obey what the law demands. We're to love. It's not a question of flip the coin and see who will love. It's just we're to love. Now, I can honestly say, I don't love the murderer. I don't love the drunkard. I don't love the homosexual. I don't love none of them people. But I'm concerned about their soul. See, they don't want to hear that because what they want us to do is to accept the whole package. If you say you love me but hate my sin, no. You've got to take the whole package. You've got to love me and my sin. Oh, no. God didn't do that, and I'm not going to do that. God hates all workers of iniquity. He's not going to love the sin. You see, we've been hearing it for years and years and years. Well, you want to love the sinner but not the sin. Well, that's exactly correct. We do not love the sin. We're not going to stand by and watch you sin. We're not going to be a part of that. But we are concerned about your soul because you're going to die and go to hell if you do not know Jesus Christ. And if you're, again, as I said this morning, if you walk out that door knowing not Jesus Christ, that may be the last time you walk out the door. Somebody said to me one time, and I know you said that to others, and says, well, I'll make my confession in my deathbed. Go out here, step out into the street, and a car hits you, boom, that's it. Where's your deathbed confession? Where's your deathbed confession then? I know people who went out, stepped off the sidewalk. I've read stories of people stepped off the sidewalk, slipped, come back, hit their head, and died instantly. Where's your bed confession then? Where's your deathbed confession? See, you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen from one minute to the next. That's why I said this morning, today is the day of your salvation. This is the day that you're supposed to believe in Jesus Christ, because there is no tomorrow. You never know. The husband does not labor all day because the law tells him to support his family. He labors because he loves them. We don't have to be told to work to support our families. We do it because we love our families. And if we want anything for them, if we want to feed, clothe them, and house them, we got to work. So where there's love, there will be no murder, no dishonesty, no stealing, or other kinds of selfishness, as we talked about this morning. There won't be none of that. The world hates us. The world murders. The world is dishonest. The world steals. The world is selfish. See the difference? They hate us. But Christ said, no worries. They hated me first. And they will hate you. You know, he didn't leave us with this whole bed of roses like everything's going to be fine. He told us, the world will hate you because they hated me first. But here's the good thing. We love God because he loved us first. And he saved us. And because of that spirit, I'm not going to say that we'll never be dishonest. Let God be true and every man a liar. But that doesn't change the fact, see? I had somebody tell me one time, in fact, a preacher, I said, they lied to me. Everybody lies. That's not the point. Everybody lies. So that excuses a person for lying? I don't think so. Note that Paul says here, when we read those commandments, we'll go back to Romans 8 there, or Romans 13. Let me get back here. Romans 13 again in verse 8, or verse 9, for this thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet. We notice something here. We notice that Paul says nothing about the Sabbath, because the Sabbath law was actually part of the Jewish ceremonial code and never applied to the Gentiles or to the church. This isn't the Sabbath day, though we're supposed to keep it holy. This is the Lord's day. On the first day of the week, we come into the house of God, the Lord's house, and we serve him. So 9 of the 10 commandments are repeated in this epistle for Christians to obey, but the commandment about the Sabbath is not repeated. So those who believe in, Saturday is the Sabbath, Seventh-day Adventists, I'll just say it, they believe that Saturday is the Sabbath. And here's the clincher. Well, we keep the Sabbath day. Well, no, you don't. If you break just one of the commandments for the Sabbath, just one, maybe a half of one. If you break a half of one for the Sabbath, you know what? You broke them all. And if you broke them, then you're not keeping the Sabbath. Well, how so? If you know that he's Seventh-day Adventist, I'll ask him, well, how far do you drive to church? Right there, that'll clinch it right there. Because they're only supposed to go so many feet, so many yards, or so many miles. That's it. You broke the Sabbath. How can you keep the Sabbath if you broke it? See? It is frustrating. And they got all these things. Oh, no, we keep the Sabbath. Well, if that's the case, then if it was that important, why didn't Paul mention it here? Why didn't he say, keep the Sabbath day? Keep it holy. Why didn't he say that? He didn't even put in there the Lord's day. He just said, this is the commandments that we're supposed to keep. And then lastly, the third point I have here is we're supposed to have the spirit of love. The spirit of love, because the Spirit is love. The Spirit that dwells in us loves. That's why we can honestly say, I hate your sin, but I love you because I have a concern for lost souls. There's nothing wrong with saying that. And it would be the truth. If you want to see anybody die and go to hell, I don't care what they've done. You can look back on your youth before you were saved. How did you act? What did you do? What was your life? What did it consist of? Was it all perfect? Were you lawless? Can you honestly say before you were saved you were lawless? I don't think anybody can say that. So we understand that part of it. They just want to be able to have their cake and eat it too. What it comes down to, they want to embrace what they say is, well, we're a Christian. We want to embrace that. And we expect you to accept our sin. And many of the churches out here, so-called churches, many of them are doing that very thing. They're embracing it because we're supposed to love. Love the person, love their sin. It don't matter what they're doing. We're supposed to love them. See, sin, as we talked a little bit this morning about it, and we've talked about it before, sin is leaven. And Paul tells us there in 1 Corinthians that we're supposed to purge that leaven. Get it out. So how are you going to let somebody in the church, how are you going to baptize somebody in the church that is full of leaven? That is contrary to what the Bible teaches. And say it's okay. Don't make any sense. My wife never liked Carrie Underwood. Listened to a couple of her, country hymns or songs or whatever. But the day I read the article about that they accept homosexualities into the church, that was the end of that. I don't care how much you like Carrie Underwood. I'm not going to accept that. And I'm not going to accept anybody that does believe that. Because it's wrong. It's sin. You can't read the first 2 chapters of Romans and come away from there and say, oh, there's nothing wrong with sin. So we have the spirit of love. It is often difficult for us to love those who reject the gospel and ridicule our Christian testimony, but this love can come from the Spirit and reach out to them. I think we've all had problems and times when people do wrong against us. It's hard to love them. It's very difficult sometimes. Now, Paul said there in Romans 5:5, he says, and hope maketh not ashamed, because the love of God is shed abroad in our hearts by the Holy Ghost, which is given unto us. So the Holy Spirit's there. It's given unto us, whereby we can love. See, if we didn't have the Spirit, then we don't have love. We don't even know what love is without the Spirit of God. I mean, we think we do. When I first married not when I first married my wife, when I first met my wife, I loved her. And then after I was saved, I knew what that love was. I knew it was it's different than it was before. 1 Corinthians 13:8, Paul says, love never fails. Love never fails. A lot of people out there like to debate. Not me. I won't argue and I won't debate. Here it is. You either accept it or you don't. The more people are won through love than through arguments. You show a sincere love toward a person, that's going to be much better than arguing with that person. Not to embarrass him, and not because he's here. That's one of the things Brother Ray taught me, that we have to accept a person when we meet them, and not try to pick them apart with their faults, because I had to come to the truth, right? You had to come to the truth. How did we come to the truth? Because somebody beat it over our head or argued with us? No, because somebody loved us enough to show us and teach us the truth. That's how we come. That's how we come to Jesus Christ, is through love. Because we love those, whether they're lost or not. We love them because of the fact that we're concerned about their spiritual condition. The Christian who is walking in love is the best citizen and the best witness. So if you want to be a good witness, then you need to love. You need to love the community. If you're going to go out here, Brother Ray and Brother Lonnie is talking about going out here and passing out tracts. You got to love these people. When you go and hand that tract to that person, you got to have a love in your heart for that person's soul. You don't have to love their sin. I'm not saying that. You know better. You have to love that person's soul. You have to understand. Do you know that you are going to die and go to hell if you don't believe in Jesus Christ as your Savior? That's what they need to know. Don't argue with them. Just let them go. This is like anything else. If the Lord's in it, it'll happen. We can't make it happen. It has to happen through Him. May God bless His word to your heart today.